Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. Delighted to welcome back Bill Braniff, who is the executive director of the Polarization and Extremism Research Innovation Lab at American University. Welcome back, Bill. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. Thank you.
In the immigration realm and in the political conversation about something called the Great Replacement Theory. What is that and where did it come from?
So the Great Replacement Theory is a conspiracy theory. Let's get that straight right off the bat, which asserts that there is an intentional strategy orchestrated by a community of elites. And those elites are sometimes a reference to a Jewish cabal internationally or nationally, sometimes a reference to political leadership in the United States, often liberal political leaders. And this elite group is intentionally orchestrating the replacement of white culture and white majority populations with populations of color, minority populations of some form. And that this intentional replacement is intended to allow those elites to get more and more power, which is why they're incentivized to do it. But in the process, is going to result in a white genocide in which there is no future for a pure white race. It emerges out of a 2011 book written by a French far-right conspiratorial author, Renaud Camus, and it has gained traction in the United States as well as in Europe.
So the last time I checked, the native-born population of the United States was something like 87%, almost 90%. If this conspiracy is underway, how do they explain the fact that it's really not taken off? What facts do they look to as evidence that somehow white Americans are being swamped by outsiders?
So there's different arguments that are made. One of them has to do with low birth rates in white majority population, coupled with the increasing visibility of mixed race and non-white populations in the United States. And so if the white birth rate is declining and immigration is increasing, as are things like interracial marriage, as are things like affirmative action programs, which perhaps are hurting the ability of white men to make an income and therefore be attractive candidates for marriage and procreation, right? All of these things are sort of used as evidence for this conspiracy to undermine white male supremacy in the United States. But you're correct that the conspiracy is based on threats to sacred values, much more so than pragmatic reality or data.
Applying this seems to be a large strain of misogyny. As you pointed out, it's about white male dominance. There is anger or anxiety that women are not having enough children. How does that figure into this racialized or racist conspiracy theory?
So implied in the Great Replacement theory is this belief that the white race is superior to those that it's being replaced by. So if you just take that initial premise, there's an inherent hierarchy here that is the basis upon which the conspiracy is built. And so that conspiracy is not just hierarchical in a white versus non-white sense. Part of the problem is described in the conspiracy theory is that this low birth rate issue is exacerbating the problem of replacement. And that begs the question, why is there a low birth rate? Well, the answer to that is often, well, it's the loss of traditional gender roles, including both feminism on the one hand and the emasculation of men on the other. It's because of the affront of gay culture to white male supremacy. Well, if those are the contributors to the problem, then the solution must clearly be their opposites. Traditional gender roles, including the subservience of women and the hypermasculinity of men so that they can take their hierarchical place above women. And of course, this disdain of gay culture as an affront. And then if you take it even further, related to the Great Replacement theory is this idea that those replacing the white population pose a physical threat as well as a demographic threat. And one common way in which propagandists convey that physical threat is that immigrants or minorities are rapists, or their interracial marriages are polluting the white bloodline. Only white men can save women from this outcome and thereby save the white race. And so instead of interracial marriage going from a woman's choice to a threat to white male supremacy, right? Um, these seemingly day-to-day concerns about immigration and maybe someone, I lose my job, or maybe there's I feel like there's an increased threat I might be mugged. No, we're not talking about those day-to-day concerns. We're talking about symbolic threats to my sacred values and identity. And this is why the misogyny becomes a very powerful mobilizing factor within white supremacy.
And that's, I would suppose, why you hear so much talk and misinformation, disinformation about crime, claiming that
Yeah,
immigrants are responsible for crime, when in fact, statistically,
right.
immigrants have a lower level of crime than do native born Americans. People may be thinking, well, this sounds so off the beam. It sounds so extreme. People believe all kinds of things. Does this really pose a threat to us? What incidents, what evidence do we have that this is really a physical, dangerous phenomenon that is putting our lives, our property, our communities at risk?
Unfortunately, we have an abundance of data regarding mass casualty crimes and homicides that have directly resulted from the belief in the Great Replacement theory and the attack on sacred values that it entails, and therefore the need that I have to defend the white race. And it is urgent. There's a white genocide on right now. And if I don't act right now, there won't be a future for the white race, right? That's the stakes of the game if you're a believer, and that's resulted in mobilization to violence. In 2017, we saw the Unite the Right rally in which torch-carrying white supremacists were chanting, "You will not replace us, Jews will not replace us." In 2018, a white supremacist killed 11 individuals at the Tree of Life Congregation's synagogue in Pittsburgh due to the attackers' belief that Jews were responsible for fostering immigration into the United States as part of the Great Replacement theory. In 2019, another white supremacist engaged in a mass casualty attack in Poway, California, blaming Jews for white European genocide. And he specifically referred to the Tree of Life attack, as well as the mass attack in New Zealand, in Christchurch, in which that attacker published a manifesto called the Great Replacement. In 2019, a white supremacist traveled hundreds of miles to target Latinos in El Paso, Texas, at a Walmart. The attacker was motivated by a Hispanic invasion, in his words. In 2022, a white supremacist traveled over 200 miles to conduct an attack at the Tops supermarket in Buffalo, New York. Federal prosecutors highlighted his motivation was to prevent Black people from replacing white people and eliminating the white race. In 2023, we saw yet another fatal attack, a racially motivated attack at the Dollar General in Jacksonville, Florida, killing 3. Now, some of these, the Pittsburgh attack, the Top supermarket attack, these were the most lethal mass casualty attacks in United States history on Jews and Blacks, respectively. So unfortunately, the evidence is fairly clear that this is a particularly virulent narrative.
So it seems that, first of all, these are generally men who are doing this. I don't believe there was any instance in which there are women involved in other mass killing situations, but they are men. And secondly, that it's a single individual who's going. They don't bring like a bunch of friends with them. What do you make of that? What does that tell us about the psyche of the people who are doing these things?
So um, these individuals are very much embedded in online communities. I failed to mention in my comment about the Unite the Right rally, that one of these individuals at the rally murdered Heather Heyer, a counter protester, in the day after that rally. He was associated with a violent extremist organization. He was a member. He acted independently in that moment, but certainly did not act independently in the process by which he came to believe that violence was justified. The perpetrator of the Tree of Life synagogue shooting was highly active in online violent extremist communities, specifically through the platform Gab. And if you look at all of the individuals he was engaged with, and I did because I was the government's expert witness in his prosecution, he was highly networked with many individuals who have fomented violence and violent narratives online. He was not alone by any stretch. He was also not alone in his antipathy for the Jewish community. He exhibited horrifically racist and violent sentiment towards African Americans, towards women, towards interracial marriage. And so he was immersed in a intolerant and violent online community.
Let's talk a little bit about your expert testimony. What were you asked to opine on? What were you trying to explain to the court, the decision makers there about this phenomenon or about this one individual?
Sure, it's important to state that when the U.S. government conducts these trials, it's important for an objective expert witness to explain to both the judge and the jury what do the symbols, the terminology, the allusions in someone's online social media posts and behaviors, what do those things mean in context? Because they can, to most people, thankfully, they're somewhat foreign ideas and concepts. And so some of it is just explaining to the judge and the jury so they can then interpret the evidence that's being put in front of them. So on the